Hello there, thank you so much for stopping by. My name is ChitChad, and welcome back to another episode of... Today we're going to be continuing our build inside a Planet Coaster, specifically working on the Luigi's Mansion area of this Super Mario theme park that we are building. We're going to be adding the boo that we made in the previous episode to a couple areas in this Luigi's Mansion themed part of the park. We're going to be adding him, of course, in that gift shop that I had a rant about in the previous episode, and we're going to be adding him, of course, to the ride itself. You'll see that I'm just kind of like testing out thoughts and where I want this character to be, just because, again, this is Luigi's Mansion, so we got to have boos, and I thought it would be really cool in this hallway that I had built. Between recording sessions, I actually went back and modified the track layout for the Luigi's Mansion ride and shortened it a considerable length, just because, like I said in the previous episode as well, this ride, or maybe not the previous episode, but the first episode I did when I came back, I was just really scared to start working on this part, of the Luigi's Mansion build, the actual ride itself. I know that's silly, but I was really worried about it because I kept thinking about how just insane the workload was going to be on trying to get this ride finished. So I decided to cut a couple of sections in the later part of the ride and just opting for a couple of jump scare moments with the boos and with some animated boos that I'm going to be doing later. And like I said, I'm going to try and limit the amount of customized characters. And what I mean by customized is like really specific ghost characters. And I know there's a lot of really great boss fight moments with some of those characters, but in order to kind of add those individuals into the ride, it's going to have to be either in like limited animation, illustration, or full-on animation. And I want to do the big reveal kind of at the end with Luigi fighting the main bad of the original game, at least. I don't know who the big bad is in the second game or the DS game, if that's even like a true sequel or a prequel. I honestly don't know. I've never played it, and it's been on my list for forever, and I've seen it been played, but I just haven't. But if it's anything like the end boss at the arcade game, it's a pretty epic fight. So I just want to have that last reveal just be a really cool one where it's going to be Luigi fighting that character, and you're kind of like outside on the second level of the mansion, and you're just seeing him fight it. And I just kind of want to have like I said, not just a reveal, but just be able to really build out some of these key scenes and not have to worry about so much of the in-between. Because even thinking about what I'm really basing this ride off of, which is the Haunted Mansion at the Disney parks, there are a couple of sections throughout those rides where there isn't just a lot of stuff to look at. Like, they kind of bring you in from scene to scene, and for example, towards the beginning of the ride, you're going through a hallway, which really the only thing there is just a couple doors that have some sort of gimmick, whether that door knocks or whether it bodes in and out, like something's breathing inside of it. Just a couple of like things to kind of tide you over until you get back to until you get to the next major scene. So I kind of want to find ways to do that, and I think the easiest way is just to play off of a lot of the picture frames that we've been adding all throughout the queue and all throughout the ride, and have characters kind of like fade in and out from those paintings and those portraits and the frames themselves. And I just think that would be really fun and a way to kind of tide the the rider over until you get to another major key scene, which we have several throughout that ride. Of course, we already have one in particular, which is going to be when you see the mansion itself, which we're going to add some sort of timed element to that beyond just the gate opening. And then you kind of go into the main hall. From there, you're going to go into the kitchen. From there, you're going to travel up the staircase, and then obviously onto the second floor, which you are able to see the ride, and thus the ride is able to see the rest of the queue. And I think that's a really cool moment where you can kind of see people below you. And I want to try and find a way to potentially obscure that vision a bit further, maybe by adding cobwebs or something, just so that when you're looking at it through the ride, it's a bit creepier than when you would be looking up from the queue. You know what I mean? So it kind of doesn't break the thematic elements that are going on, because if you were imagining looking at being from the ride and seeing all those people, you might like, oh, I'm kind of brought out of the experience because they're just waiting in lines, you know, drinking a drink or eating popcorn. That's not really scary, and there's going to be a build up towards the end of the ride. So I want to try and maintain that as much as possible. So we might play around with some ideas in the future. Speaking of playing around with a couple ideas, one of the things that I was thinking about between episodes was that Kamek's kind of magical spin doesn't necessarily fit in this area of the park. So I was thinking about potentially adding another flat ride, which I wanted to add and utilize the Boo that we had made because I was really happy with how he turned out. And I think having a Boo themed ride fits a lot better in this section of the park than Kamek. So you'll see me try to play around with a couple of like ideas as far as where I wanted this ride to be placed, and you see that I've wiped out like the whole left half of Luigi's Mansion area, and I decided against that, went back and forth because I really wanted this area to look similar to the way the layout is over on the Yoshi's Island in the Toad Town area, just because I was really happy with how that layout worked, but trying to add in a second flat ride wasn't necessarily working well. So the ultimate decision I came to was, let's move Kamek's ride over to either the Yoshi area, which he would fit really well in that theme, seeing as I believe you fight him in Yoshi's Island and Yoshi's Story. I think he's been kind of the main, well, no, wasn't Baby Bowser in Yoshi's Story? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I remember him because I thought he like summoned some baddies to like take your Yoshi away after you died, air quotes, and then they would put him into like the dungeon, then you'd have to rescue them at some other point. But he'll work in either that area or the Mushroom Kingdom area, which again is going to be the last area of the park. So he's going to still be in the park because I really like how that flat ride turned out. I just didn't think it worked necessarily in this area. And once I saw this particular flat ride with the octopus, realizing that we could obscure the octopus and place a Boo on top, I was just instantly like, oh, that's perfect. I want to do that. I want to do that. And I still think the queue works really well. Because I do kind of want it to be this overgrown kind of forest leading up to it. So it still has this kind of like fantastical element to it. And if we wanted to creep it up just a little bit, I can do that by adding more piranha plants, or I can do that by adding cobwebs, or maybe even spiders kind of inside there. Either way, like I can still find ways to make it look more spooky than it is already. But the flip side of that is I don't want it to be too spooky. And I remember talking about this in previous episodes that I don't want it to be too spooky because it is still Mario, you know? It's not like it's going to go over the top with the spookiness, the spook fest. So it's kind of like when Disney puts on the what do they call it? The not so spooky Halloween party. It's like, we're trying to be spooky, but we can't be too spooky.
Oh, all right. We want to like entertain the kids, but we don't want them to pee their pants. I don't want to deal with that. So let's call it the Mickey's Not So Spooky Halloween thing, and voila, more ticket sales.
And I remember I wanted to go to one of those because I thought it'd be really fun. And, maybe eventually the girlfriend and I will make that happen and go to like one that's Halloween. But I remember specifically one year, and this is because I'm a Power Rangers fan. I remember specifically one year looking at like what you're not allowed to wear at the park, and like one of the first things was Power Rangers. And I also think it coincided with the year that they lost kind of the rights of Power Rangers when Saban brought it back. And I don't know, I just think that's really spiteful and funny, but I think they were using it more as a reference to you can't wear like masks or helmets or anything like that, which is totally understandable in a theme park. But now that we have kind of broke the ice with the Luigi's Mansion ride and actually working on it, I decided to start filling out one of the last rooms, which is going to be kind of like this attic that you kind of break through and head back towards the beginning of the ride. So it's going to be kind of the end where Professor Egad and Luigi and Mario are all kind of reunited with each other, and then the ride kind of breaks down, and then it's not a very natural transition, I know, but trying to figure out a way to get the ride from like the beginning, which is in the outside. The outside because it's pretending to be outside, right? Because you came in from the outside, now you're in the show buildings outside, all the way into the mansion, from the mansion to the second floor, from the second floor back to that outside area. Is just like, oh my gosh, if I were to actually map it out and try and make that work, this ride would be so much longer than it already is, just because the elevation that you're able to get with the this Huntsman coaster, it's not the easiest thing to work with, but it is realistic because there's no way those things would just drop. You'll see me kind of like switch from working on this attic piece to working on the exterior, just because as I was building stuff out and trying to like make this all fit inside of the showroom, I was having a lot of trouble just because not only does this section kind of obviously lead into the exit, but it's right over the exit to the ride and it's right over the gift shop. So trying to fit all of this in this area was like problematic, and there's been a couple times where I've actually had to increase the size of the show building, especially because of all the trees, because the trees are like super tall, but they have a really cool like drop off and they have like that trunk pattern that I really don't want to mess with, and I don't want to sink them too far into the ground because then you lose a lot of that cool detail. So I kind of have to leave them somewhat as they are and just kind of increase the show building, which I'm not going to add custom textures everywhere. I mean, if you even look at a lot of show buildings in theme parks now, a lot of them are just black walls, and that's okay because they're really not the focus. I mean, I go and watch videos of like the low light cameras that people have now that they take on a lot of the dark rides. One of my favorite ones to watch is a ride from Disney's Animal Kingdom, and it's the dinosaur ride. And I just really love how that ride was made, just because it was kind of like lazy genius when they were trying to build that whole land kind of to build hype for the dinosaur movie, and they kind of like force Aladar kind of in it, and it just seems really awkward, but like the ride itself is actually really fun. But watching it in low light, you just see like just how little they actually built into the ride and how much of it is just kind of obscured from your vision just due to lighting. Like lighting plays such a huge element to those rides. That's why I like to spend a lot of time with the lighting, just because I know that that's just really it's just like the icing on the cake, you know? So I really want to spend time with that. So once everything's kind of in place, I'm going to do another pass on the lighting and just make sure everything looks good, and then we can add kind of timed elements with the lighting, and just everything will hopefully, I'm hoping everything will look super cool in the end. But that's gonna wrap it up for this episode. Again, thank you so much for watching. I super appreciate it. In the next episode, we're probably going to continue working on the actual Luigi's Mansion ride, and yeah, I'm probably get into some art and animation here shortly after, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. So as always, until next time, I will chat with you later.